This is Lawang, Sewu, a beautifully restored heritage railway museum in Semarang, Indonesia. Under its bright white corridors and clear blue skies, it draws thousands of tourists every single day. A massive restoration effort recently transformed the site. Millions of dollars were spent scrubbing the facades, polishing the sweeping central staircases, and preserving the European stained glass that defines its grandeur. But despite the government's efforts to scrub it clean, a different reputation persists. Throughout Indonesia and much of Asia, Lawang Sewu is considered one of the most haunted buildings in existence. This spooky status is deeply rooted in local pop culture. It reached a peak in 2007 with the release of a blockbuster horror film that cemented the building's image as a place of terror. Which raises the question, why is this specific complex at the center of so many nightmare stories? To find the answer, we have to look past the shadows and examine the real events that left their mark on these walls decades ago. To understand the reality of Indonesia's 20th century, we cannot dismiss the ghosts. We have to investigate them as historical records. Night watchmen and visitors have long reported the sounds of phantom soldiers marching through the halls and the apparition of a tragic, headless Dutchwoman wandering the main corridors. This era began in 1904. The Dutch colonial government commissioned the site as a massive flagship headquarters for their expanding railway network. This diagram shows how the architects adapted the complex for the tropics. By building high ceilings and 928 massive doors and windows, they maximized airflow. This gave the building its Javanese name, Lawang Sewu, the Thousand Doors. The sheer scale of the headquarters was a monument to wealth generated by the Dutch through the relentless extraction of Indonesian resources. The legends of phantom soldiers and colonial ghosts serve as cultural echoes of this period, reflecting the rigid military and economic control that formed the foundation of the complex. The most feared entity in the folklore is the kuntilanak, a vampiric spirit. Rumors suggest she was born from negative energy trapped in the basement. That energy has a specific historical source. In 1942, Japanese forces invaded Indonesia, expelled the Dutch, and converted this building into their military headquarters. Under Japanese control, the cavernous basement of Building B was transformed into a brutal prison and interrogation chamber. The squat prisons were concrete boxes 2 feet high. 9 prisoners were jammed inside, forced to squat in stagnant water until death. Standing prisons were 2 feet wide, where prisoners stood upright for days, unable to move. For those who survived the torture, the end was often worse. They were taken to the basement corners, beheaded, and thrown into a nearby river. The victims of these atrocities included both Dutch colonial officials and local Indonesian resistance fighters. The folklore of a vampiric spirit born of negative energy is a direct psychological reflection of the very real, unspeakable violence that occurred on that exact concrete floor. Visitors also claim to hear a final anomaly, the agonizing screams and phantom sounds of a chaotic gun battle echoing through the empty rooms. In October 1945, immediately after Japan's surrender, a power vacuum gripped the nation as Indonesia declared its independence. This culminated in the Battle of Semarang. A brave group of young Indonesian railway workers fought fiercely to wrest control of Lawang Sewu from the remaining Japanese military police. The fighting inside the building was brutal, leaving bullet holes that remain visible today. Many of these young fighters were captured, tortured, and executed right here before the battle ended. These phantom screams serve as a persistent cultural memory of the martyred youth who spilt their blood for national independence. After independence, the building was eventually vacated. By the late 1970s, Lawang Sewu fell into intense physical decay. The white paint peeled, black mold coated the walls, and the basement flooded with dark water. This ruined, haunted house aesthetic is exactly what allowed the trauma-born ghost stories to explode into mainstream pop culture. Fearing that the site's rich history was being buried by urban legends, the Indonesian government launched its massive restoration project to clean up the complex and its reputation. There is a clear irony here. While the government intended to move past the building's spooky reputation,
That ghostly history is exactly what draws thousands of tourists and thrill seekers every day. You can repaint the walls, but cultural memory is not so easily erased. The ghost stories of Lawang Sewu serve as a protective vessel, ensuring that the victims of colonial rule, the tortured prisoners, and the young martyrs are never forgotten.